Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Man, I keep lagging behind and keep needing to produce content. I've just been reaching for everything I can find to bring to you guys, other than just a rant about how cool something is, which is what I'm going to do tonight. But what's going on in the world? We're still fighting the legal battles we have been fighting. It looks like the Texas pushback against the suppressors is looking to go forward, which is kind of good news for us. It looks like there's some movement towards cannabis legalization. In Tennessee, there was a lady, Tennessee or Kentucky, I believe, maybe even Missouri. And I'm not bothering to look up the story because it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. She got caught with a cartridge, I believe, a cannabis cartridge or wax or something like that, while she was carrying a gun, and this circuit judge decided that wasn't against the Second Amendment because she wasn't actually under the influence at the time. Now, the repercussions for this are the same thing that they always have been. Currently, if you imbibe any of the cannabis stuff, you are prohibited from owning a firearm. That is because cannabis is still a federally prohibited item. That said, there's some hope for that. There's also looks like there's some more hope that's coming for felons. Once you've been convicted and served your time, it looks like you may be able to get your 2A rights back eventually. At least that's what I'm hoping. You know, I have seen a couple things on Facebook in the last month that have kind of bothered me in two ways, especially when it comes to the political debate. One of them is people asking or saying that they believe in the death penalty or bring the death penalty back. And let me tell you this, I was all for the death penalty until I had a very close friend who talked to me and explained something that I never actually thought about. You know, anyone who's been in the 2A as long as I have, or has been alive as long as I have in the United States, has realized that our government isn't exactly someone of the highest character that you want to mimic or want them involved in your life at all if you can help it. And it made me think about this, having a very good conversation with this gentleman about the death penalty. As flawed as the government is, and I believe that there are some people that actually should be returned back to the sender because they are that vile. However, think about who you're empowering to make that decision, the government. Do you honestly, in your heart of hearts, after living through the COVID crap, living through this day and age that we have right now, do you believe our federal government is capable of making life and death decisions for people, especially when it comes to their actual living or dying? And that's where I've had a hard pass when it comes to endorsing the death penalty. I understand, believe me, I do. There's a lot of treasonous people that need to be dealt some serious justice. However, I don't believe our government is ever going to get to that point where we could trust them 100% ever again. And with that, I don't know that I would trust any government entity to make a life or death decision when it came to someone living or dying, no matter how vile they are, because all it takes is for them to be wrong one time and to kill an innocent man. And when you have the likes of Kamala Harris, who have actually prosecuted men, kept them in jail when they were innocent, if that was a capital offense where he may have been looking at the death penalty, I have a real reservation with allowing people like her to make the decision whether he lives or dies. So I digress. You know, I want to talk about something that's so minuscule and so weird. If you've been in the 2A and you've been looking at, you know, all the deals possible, you probably signed up for a list or two. And if you've been in it as long as I have, you've signed up for a ton of lists. And it comes to a point where you're sick and tired of seeing the damn emails and you start marking them as spam. Or at least it came to that point in my case. Now, I understand some of you are still looking for those killer deals if you're trying to expand your collection. I'm at the point nowadays that I'm looking more so for ammunition more so than expanding my collection, because the collection I'm looking at expanding the pieces, they're rare and I'm going to have to put up a lot of cash. Case in point, the G43, I'm probably going to be looking at, $3 at the low end to $10,000 when I can finally get there. But it's going to be a piece that I have to add to my gun collection before I pass. But when you think about all those lists, Palmetto State Armory, Apex guns. If you buy from Apex, be prepared to change your credit card because you're going to get it phished and they're going to do false information, all this other shit. It's not them, it's their security kind of sucks. You see magazine deals. This is all important when you're first getting started with the particular weapon you've chosen as your duty gun, your work gun. As you progress and get older, and you've gotten farther along in the 2A, that's not as impressive or as important. But what I did see was Atlantic Firearms in one of their flyers mentioned that they have some Polish K98s. And it led me to think about something very key to what my dad did. Sorry, I had to take a drink there. My dad got me hooked into military surplus early on, specifically German rifles. And once he hooked me with the story of how they're manufactured, what they did, and all the other good stuff, the historical pieces, it got me to where, as I've said before, where I wanted to collect Mausers. And it made me think about this particular thing right now. If you want to hook someone new to the 2A, how do you get them started? A lot of people nowadays will tell you, get an AR-15, get a Glock pistol, get an a Smith & Wesson M&P pistol. You'll start getting them in the 2A. That's great if it's only for self-defense. If you're looking at hooking them in this lifestyle forever, I would recommend giving them the good story. And when I say the good story, the history of said weapon, whatever it is. And I actually recommend you get them started on military surplus. Because as a kid, I have read so many stories on the K98, what it was capable of, what it was in its day. And for its day, it was the assault rifle for its time and place in 1898. It was one of those guns that everybody wanted, including the Americans, even though we had lever-action guns that were a little faster, but it did not have the punch, it did not have the power that the K98 did. The Europeans, the Germans specifically in this case, were onto some secret sauce that it took us a long time to figure out. Once we did, we surpassed them. I'm not going to lie. If you look at today's arms, and I've spoke about this, you find innovation, you find new stuff, you find new calibers, you find new everything in one way or another, reinvented again by Americans. If you look at those countries that have since went away from the 2A to where you're not even allowed to carry a gun or own a gun without a license or being heavily burdened by the state, you notice that their innovation died years ago, and they're basically tacking on to our innovation. And that goes for modern firearms. But if you go towards older firearms, specifically like the K98 or the garbage rod, the Mosin Nagant, something like that as a entry-level gun to get, someone interested in this. Maybe it's not their first gun. Maybe it is. Maybe it's after you've got them into the 2A and they've got their AR-15 and they're looking at what the next step is. Get them hooked into something like this. And here's where I'm going with this. Once you get so deep in the weeds with military surplus weapons, you learn their story, you learn their capabilities, you learn their equipment, like whether they had stripper clips, in-block clips, no clips, anything like that, bayonets, the whole 9 yards. Once you get them into that, you've hooked them into a story that builds upon itself. They're going to look at that as where gun development started, where it went next. They'll try to figure it out, and it leads down a pathway that I myself followed. Okay? And once you get deep in that pathway, once you get deep in those woods, it's hard coming out. And we need that nowadays in the 2A. Not just to build the Othiases and the Ian McCullen from Forgotten Weapons and, CNR Armory, any of those guys. No, we need that so we can keep this for the next generation. Those stories need to perpetrate or continue forever so that our kids know where our legacy came from. They understand the innovation that came from back in the gap to where innovation is now, and they can start planning accordingly, or maybe they decide to try to jump into design. Maybe they figure out that they think that they're better than some of the other guys. What they'll find is that more often than not, in the 2A, all the old ideas are new again. If you look, the caliber that everybody likes to pick on right now, the 6.5 Creedmoor, isn't really super new. If you look at the ballistics and what it's doing about what a 6.5 by 55 Swedish did. It's just in a new cartridge, in a new form factor, and it's doing it with newer projectiles and newer technology. Okay? But if you look at like the AR-15, how many different permutations of the AR-15 are available nowadays? Same with the Kalashnikov. You look at all these things about how they want to move projectiles, how they want to detonate a cartridge. The newest thing that I have seen the Army's dealing with, and they're building their new M1A3 tank with it, is how they're detonating their cartridges using electrical chemical impulses, meaning they're using electricity to set the cartridge off, which allows it to be a little spicier and have a little more kick. That's the future of the 2A. And when I say that, we have done everything, every permutation of where a grip can go, where a stock can go, cartridges, cartridge results, cartridge capabilities. We've done that to the nth degree. It's time for a new innovation, and the only way I see that happening in the future is either with material sciences making such a big splash that the guns themselves become super light things made out of plastic or something similar, or we start looking at projectiles, propellants, and how we detonate a cartridge. And if we need any of that in any stream, case in point, the railgun. Okay, we're getting to that point where we've seen in human history and human evolution, we've seen so many different permutations of these designs. Something radical has got to be done to change the dynamic. And that's where I see hooking anyone into military surplus as a plus, because it starts them thinking about the innovations that it took to get there. The metallic cartridge, the rimmed cartridge, in-block magazines or clips, that type of thing. We get people interested in those pieces, and we get them starting to look at the 2A a little different. And if we can hook them with the story and get them involved, that's the key point here, then we've got them for life. And I think that's a big idea for the 2A. If we want the 2A to exist, it can't just be about 100% freedom. It's got to be part of the story and how we tell it. Because in today's society, you're seeing people advocate for retardment of freedom. Don't let people speak out. Don't let people carry guns. Well, why? What is the next step? Anytime we lose freedoms, you have to ask that. What is the end game of what they're trying to do? They're trying to get a compliant populace. And that's exactly opposite of everything that runs in the American DNA. And the only way I could think of fighting this is actually jumping on a mic, talking about the 2A, and being the best advocate I could be about this sport, this hobby, and getting enough people interested to make a difference. Like, share, subscribe, and most importantly, be great.